The final WNBA playoff ratings are in, and I got to tell you, I don't think they make for very polarizing takes. The numbers for the playoffs overall up year over year, which is the trend for the WNBA. That is impressive. But the margin from which they were up over last year shrunk a bit at the very end because the finals ratings went down as the games went along. Of course, the series got out of, being competitive, which is always going to hurt numbers, and therefore the finals were actually slightly down from last year. So overall, the trends are up, but the explosive growth, wasn't quite in your face at the end of the day, or at least at the end of the season, where the finals tapered off as the series went along. So that was what was released by ESPN. Here's the actual numbers for you. This is the PR statement, of course, always spun as positively as possible. Most watched WNBA postseason ever on ESPN networks. Across 24 games, the 25 WNBA postseason averaged 1.2 million viewers, up 5% year over year. 25 WNBA Finals average 1.5 million viewers, second most watched on ESPN, only behind 2024. It was trending above 2024 until the last few games. Well, the first game is what really put it up there. The first game had a big number, and then after that, it trended downwards. The most watched WNBA Finals game one in 28 years, like I was mentioning, 1.9 million viewers. So, a good story. There's no question. There's no question. Of course, the numbers would have been higher if the Fever had made the finals. The numbers would have been higher if Caitlin Clark were in the playoffs. You see that average of 1.2 million viewers for the playoffs. The Fever game against Brazil, for comparison, in the preseason did 1.3 million viewers. So a preseason game, that just goes to show you the impact that could have. But as I've always said, these things happen in conjunction, right? Like the growth has happened in conjunction with Caitlin Clark, and you don't want it to be solely dependent on her in perpetuity. And clearly the growth has been steady and the trends continue to go up. Now you look at the WNBA Finals numbers and the trends. Unfortunately, I don't know how unfortunate it really is. It's not that big a deal, but you see like it was sort of, let's just say floundering for several years before finally seeing that tick up in 2023. And then it's just like a massive jump, from a pretty good jump from 2022 to 2023, but obviously a massive jump in 2024. Huge. We all know what happened last year. And then ever so slight dip this year. And I think you sign up for that dip. I know there's new methodology and new counting numbers, which are supposed to be good for about 5 to 10%. So you factor all that in. That's all part of the context. But I think you sign up for that dip given the teams involved in the finals and given the way that the series went. Because let's be real. That's across sports. That's not specific to the WNBA. If the games aren't competitive and the series is out of hand, what's the reason to continue to tune in? That series, when Asia Wilson hit that shot in game 3, that series was over. It was really over after game 1 when Alyssa Thomas didn't make those free throws. But that, doesn't allow that upward trend to continue to the very end. And that's the actual numbers. No bias, no agenda mixed in there. People will try to manipulate it any which way. People were calling conspiracy because of the new counting methods. That's across the board. They've updated that for Nielsen, period. It's not a WNBA thing, and it should help live sports, which is a good thing going forward. If it, the estimate was what it would be worth, like 5 to 10%. So all in all, could you argue the finals? Well, the finals were down last year. Could you argue maybe it would have been a little bit less than it was? Sure. But overall, the numbers for the playoffs, even if you're calling a boost, would be break even using that estimate from last season. And last season was the explosive, huge growth rating. Remember, for some of these other numbers, they were moving last season and acting like it didn't exist. The best since whatever, excluding 2024. So all in all, I think it's a good story. And obviously more importance for the CBA negotiations. The media rights deal is already done. But I knew there was a lot of interest around the ratings. So I thought I would present the final reveal. Of course, it stands to reason when the numbers are revealed next year, they could be even higher, significantly higher. In fact, I mean, look, the single biggest variable is Clark, and if she is healthy, then the numbers are guaranteed to go way up. The last Fever and Sun, the last playoff game for the Fever last year against the Sun, 2.5 million viewers. That's significantly higher than any of those WNBA Finals games. The even, Hospital Fever against the Aces, game 5 was 1.8 million viewers. Compare that to 1.9 of game 1 of the finals. It was almost there, and it was higher than every other finals game. The game 5 of the Aces and Fever outrated every other finals game but game 1. So with Clark, there's this wave that comes along with that. And imagine if Clark and the Fever were to make the finals. I mean, you're talking about eye-popping numbers that they have never even approached consistently, at least since the turn of the century. And that would be massive. But even without, there's the residual interest the further along she plays, because when it was announced she was out for a period of time early in the season with an injury, the ratings took a big dip. And when it was announced she was out for the season, there was an interest dip. But so many of the Caitlin Clark fans also latched onto the Indiana Fever, followed that team, rooted for that team, which helped that boost. And of course, so many of the new fans that came in last year wound up following the rest of the league, being interested in the rest of the league, and that's helped with the steady growth overall. And when your job is to create a press release, you want to paint the best story possible. And it ain't hard, right? Like, the brush strokes go pretty easy when the number you get to put out is best ever. And that's what ESPN got to put out for the playoffs. Best numbers ever. Not a hard picture to paint. I think the one caveat is they probably wished it didn't come with that little dip at the end, so that they could attach the same spin to not even spin, the same facts to the finals that were true for game 1. And then even through game 2 and 3, it was still higher than last year. So game 4, obviously, is the one that brought it down below last year. And games 2 and 3 were actually below last year too, but pulled up by game 1. Regardless, the numbers, are influenced by how competitive the series is. They're influenced by the stars. They're influenced by the market. Last year, it went to game 5 in overtime, very controversially. This year, not nearly as competitive, but nonetheless, steady growth for the WNBA, and perhaps explosive growth still to come.